Hey everybody, Dr. Diane Libido Doc here, talking about a very sensitive topic around stress and libido today, which is shame. This video is about shame, stress, and libido. And I want to talk about shame because shame is something that can bring up a lot of stress. And shame often comes from an underlying belief that there is something wrong with how you feel, something wrong with you, something wrong with how you look. These sorts of things. Now, if anything has happened where you have shame for any of these reasons and there's trauma as a back history, definitely work with somebody who is really trained in how to do that. In fact, if you feel triggered around the word shame, I suggest that you actually even turn off this particular video. So essentially with this video, what we're going to talk about is how to work with shame, because what often happens, shame is oftentimes can be due to trauma, but there's also these micro traumas, right? It might have been like maybe you feel shamed of feeling pleasure. Maybe you feel shame of your body. Maybe you feel shame of the way you have sex or the way you look when you have sex. Because oftentimes shame, like I said, comes from this feeling of something is wrong with me. Now, essentially, there can be times where feeling ashamed could be beneficial. For example, like if we do something and we make a mistake and it hurts somebody, maybe we feel a little ashamed, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. This is talking about shame based upon the definition that there's something wrong with, an individual, that you feel like something's wrong with you. And shame's so common. And I think it's so common because it's so easy for society, for our upbringing, our social, our familial cultures to put ideas on us around how we should be sexually, how we should relate to sex, how we should look, how we should act, all these different things. So when we are acting and behaving like ourselves or outside of societal or familial or cultural norms, it's easy to feel a sense of shame that there's something wrong with you when in fact you're just perhaps being you. Now, of course, we always want to make sure that this is said with the caveat of like not hurting anybody, not hurting oneself, right? So that hopefully goes without saying, but I'm going to say it just in case. So how do we work with this, right? It can be really helpful. And again, these are some ideas. I am not a psychologist. I am a sex doctor. And I help people from a libido standpoint work with their own pleasure, work with their relationships, work with that sort of, these sorts of situations. But how I have worked with people and advised people in these scenarios, provided there's no trauma, is really to start to understand what is driving that. Like what is the underlying thing around, like if you're having any shame that is creating some stress around sex, what's driving that? Like, do you have a belief? And by what's driving it, I don't mean like, oh, it's because of something that my parents said. Like maybe that's useful, but largely what I'm saying is like, do you have a belief that sex is bad, that sex is supposed to look a certain way, that that women aren't supposed to love sex? Is there anything like that? And where we're getting behind here is like, what we're trying to figure out is what is that underlying belief that is driving that sense of there's something wrong and there's something wrong with you, right? So perhaps if you feel like, oh, every time you have sex, maybe there's shame, or maybe there's shame around masturbation, right? Why? Is it because that you believe that there's something innately wrong with that it's bad? Right? And so the moment we can start to break down the why, oftentimes it's because of something that was said to us or this programming from society. But the moment we start to break down the why, like, oh, it's because I didn't think females were supposed to enjoy pleasure. Like, maybe it's something like that. I thought females were just supposed to serve the male, right? Maybe there's some subconscious thing like that. And so sometimes we have these subconscious drivers that are there from childhood and we don't even realize till we say them out loud. And then it's like, do I even believe that? Is that even still true for me anymore? And so a lot of these types of emotions, like usually there's some sort of belief, some sort of thought that is driving an emotion. So, if we're sad, right, we might be sad because all of a sudden the thought of a person we miss comes to our brain, right? And our heart aches and we're sad, right? So there's that thought. So usually, and what drives a thought, a belief that this person is like super important to me and they're absent or whatnot. So we usually have this belief thought interplay that's going to drive the emotion. So with an emotion like shame and that feeling of shame, we want to think about what are the thoughts and what are the beliefs that are actually driving that. And we change the emotion by actually changing the belief. So several videos ago, I gave an exercise of basically writing down subconscious thoughts throughout the day. So we can do a similar thing here, like, okay, whatever you're feeling shame around, in the sexual realm, right, in the libido realm, what is like, if it's shame that you're vaginally dry, if it's shame that you don't orgasm, it's shame that you feel like you don't provide your partner a good amount of pleasure, if it's shame around masturbation, whatever it is, right? So a good exercise is to take a moment and say like, okay, well, when I think about pleasing my partner, the first thought I come to my mind is, and the first word, and you can do this and see like how many words come to your mind about, say, pleasing your partner, if that's something that you feel shame around. And whatever is coming up is oftentimes there's stuff in here around like, oh, these are my beliefs around what pleasure my partner is. And then we work to change the beliefs. And we work to change the beliefs usually by like being very kind to that part of ourselves with the old belief. And then actually figuring out like what is a better program for my brain. The thing about beliefs really is that the brain's a machine, right? It's all of these zeros and ones. And the zeros and ones from computer terms is really like, is a nerve going to send a signal or is a nerve not going to send a signal, right? And so it's all these nerves and they're sending signals or they're not sending signals all over the brain. It's kind of like a computer chip. So if we have a certain belief, it's going to send certain signals that are going to generate an emotion. And so what we can do is we can begin to, over time, work on different beliefs. And what we're doing is we're changing the program. We're changing that nervous system component that's sending different messages. And when we do that, we can start to rewrite whatever program we have in our brain around shame. This takes time. This oftentimes is where meditation and visualization exercises come in. So, an idea with this is find a song that is very relaxing to you. Whatever your new belief is, put on that song and just repeat that new belief and pretend in your body like you feel it really true, like you really believe it. Like the more feeling you have in the body, the more real it becomes in your body, the more those new neural network programs actually form. So that's the best way of how to do this, right? Is really what is behind any shame, being nice to yourself about it, finding out why it's there, what you could do to reprogramming it, and then start to reprogram our brains. And that's what's cool about being an adult is like, as a child, we were just programmed by whoever was around us, right? And some programs may be serving you and some programs may not be. And so as adults, we still get programmed by people around us. We're constantly seeing things and even in billboards are like programming us from an advertising standpoint, right? So we're constantly being programmed, but we can essentially build our brains to be programmed to program ourselves in a way that serves us better. So I hope this has been helpful. Shame, I think, is a really important conversation to have because especially when it comes to sex and especially for women, due to so many years of so many different things, of just not understanding female sexuality, of classrooms not really teaching it, of things like research studies not being done on women a lot of the time. There's way more studies on male sexuality than female sexuality. So we're still in this world, right, where it's like there's so much culture that a lot of us have been brought up with of like men's sexuality, hurrah, and female sexuality, hush, 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 not that important. So it's natural that we may have some of these shame around some of these topics, which is why I think it's really important that we talk about this. So I hope this is helpful. Please do drop your comments below. Share this with anybody you think that would be served by this. I'm Dr. Diane, your libido doc. See you in another video.